The 90s! Remember that? Because I don't. Some say trans people didn't exist back then, but we all know that's false. The obscure movie Just One of the Girls or Anything for Love is a surprising trans story. However, it's not obvious to most viewers unless you dig deeper. And yes, this movie has two names, but we'll get to that later. Despite being a 90s film, not much has changed to today. The world still knows very little about being trans. And despite its convoluted premise, and the fact it never uses the word trans, the film delves into gender roles, expression, and gender identity in quite unexpected and nuanced ways. The film follows a teen musician who was bullied. She later calls herself Chrissy, so that's the name I'm going to use for her even when she's not female presented. Chrissy's father is encouraging her to physically fight against her bullies. However, Chrissy is reluctant to physically fight back. While girls get into physical fights too, it's more common among boys. And to be clear, fighting doesn't equal boy, even though it's a commonly associated gender role. But as a side note, she does briefly fight back, but it's brief, meaning that she was capable of fighting but chose not to. While out shopping with her sister, she became fixated on a dress. Much like how fighting and being male are heavily associated together but not directly linked, wearing dresses is often associated with being female, even though it's not a one-to-one thing. It's sort of like how reading is associated with intelligence. That is, unless you're reading a Ben Shapiro book. Later, Chrissy is fixated on the cheerleaders. On the surface, looking at cheerleaders looks like attraction, but to me it reads more like jealousy. Jealousy towards women. Before transitioning, I had a lot of jealousy towards women. One day when fleeing the bullies, she gets on a bus and sees a beautiful woman. Jump cut to the next scene, where she's wearing her sister's clothes. She has the idea to go to school dressed as a girl to avoid her bullies. Because of course, gender diversity never resulted in bullying.
Stripes don't go with plaid.
I really like how she's concerned about if the outfit coordinates well together, not that her brother is wearing a skirt. This indicates to me that her sister is not only very supportive, but that this likely isn't the first time that she's seen her brother wear a skirt before. However, her sister is like, you can't leave the house, not without a makeover. Now is a good time to discuss the premise of this film. If it's about a boy dressing as a girl to escape his bullies, it's absolutely absurd. Most boys in this situation will go to an adult, fight back, or take the abuse. Hell, most boys would probably disguise themselves as a boy before disguising themselves as a girl. Yes, some boys like wearing girls' clothes. After all, labels on clothing are only suggestions. But if this is a trans girl, suddenly the story makes sense. She made an opportunity to transition. Sort of like when you're struggling on a diet and you say, well, I got to the fridge, I might as well have some ice cream cake while I'm here. And hey, no shame in that. Before transition, I was a bit of a kleptomaniac. I would steal skirts, really any in my line of sight. I guess you could say, be trans, do no crime. When she starts school, nobody recognizes her, which is actually kind of realistic. One time in college, I ran into an old professor, and in order to not out myself in the middle of a busy hallway, I said, you know me, I've just gone through a dramatic change in my physical appearance. Now, despite what some critics have said, I think she passes pretty well. You might disagree with that, but remember, you're privy to the context of this film. Not to mention, most people's minds don't immediately rush to cross-dressing or transvestigating. So don't get too much in your head about passing, because most people are not gonna clock you. Also, I want to point out how she's wearing a skirt like almost every day. I wear skirts and dresses pretty much every day. There's also a funny gag of an old woman recognizing her and returning a dropped purse, and it's just no big deal, as it should be. At this point, we should discuss the elephant in the room. Even in the 90s, teachers would know her legal sex because it's basic details on student files. Chrissy makes friends with a girl named Marie, a cheerleader. In gym class, the teacher is confused because Chrissy's file says she's male. Instead of sending her to the principal or having a private conversation, she outs her to the whole class and makes her clean the girls' locker room. And since it's a 90s comedy, she faints at the sight of all the naked women. The problem here is that this movie doesn't seem to recognize that trans lesbians exist. Like, it seems to say that she's definitely a boy because she's into girls, but that's not how any of this works. Later that day, she's applying her nails on herself and quickly takes them off when her father walks in. As we'll soon see, her father is a transphobe. And her father expresses pride at the idea of his son beating someone up. This is what is known as toxic masculinity. Violence doesn't make you a man. Marie then encourages Chrissy to become a cheerleader. This combined with the looks of the cheerleaders, and I think it's just about being included with the other girls. And plot twist, Maria's brother is Kurt, one of the bullies. Kurt clearly seems to like her, but she seems a little turned off. Again, this doesn't make you any less of a woman, especially when someone comes on to you too strong or in a creepy way like this. And Marie and Chrissy talk about sex, and it honestly sounds realistic. And Chrissy seems more alive during this conversation. Being trans isn't a disguise. I was pretending to be a man for the longest time. But being a woman, it just came easily and naturally to me. Meanwhile, she also teases Kurt and gives him fashion advice like wear a bow tie, which to me feels like interest, at least subtextually. Then she tells him to stop being a bully for her, but she still is presenting as female after the bullying problem is supposedly resolved. I think on some level, Chrissy does like Kurt, even though it may not be obvious. Now, this next part delves into sexual assault. If that's triggering for you, no shame in that. Your mental health comes first. Skip to the following timestamp. And I'll give it a few seconds. Okay. And she drives her car back to her place and he gets handsy with her. And non-consensual handsiness is a turnoff, I think, to anyone. It's wrong. Always get consent. And then he kisses her without consent. This obviously makes her upset. Now, to be clear, I'm not praising this movie. I think this movie has lots of problems, including sort of brushing over sexual assault. I'm discussing this movie simply because I think it's a little bit more layered than most people give it credit for, at least unintentionally. Also, as a side note, she's portrayed as a talented musician, but as a musician, I think white noise is more interesting than her music. The next day at school, the gym coach pulls Chrissy aside and tells her cop boyfriend,
I think she's having problems with her sexual identity.
Let me be clear, I do not recommend this approach at all. If you suspect someone is queer and in the closet, do not confront them, because they're literally not ready. Instead, if you want to show support, do it in subtle ways. For example, as a gym teacher, she could put up an ally sign outside her office. Trust me, confronting someone about their queerness and then being in the closet will not go well.
Nothing leaves this room. You have my word.
Really? I mean, I don't have to go to jail?
Don't be ridiculous. I want to help you.
She says she's just trying to help, but I don't really believe her intentions because there's nothing to fix. Chrissy spills the truth and it becomes a panic. If this ever happens to you where someone comes out to you, remain calm and compassionate. Although, it gets surprising that she's surprised by this, because earlier she did see the records said male on them. Also, while she says she's a boy dressing as a girl, I think it's more likely a lack of information about being trans. She asks for the truth and tells her story.
I was 11. You know, puberty. First, I mean, it was just a panty thing. Pure fetish. And then my family, they went out of town and tried one of my sister's dresses on. I felt sides of me I've never felt before.
I genuinely believe this is her truth. Also, don't get the fetish comment misconstrued here. Yes, some people have a cross-dressing fetish. No shame in that. Early in your gender journey, it might sound really confusing, and it might feel like a fetish, even when it's not, especially if you don't know much about being trans. Sometimes early in exploration, the brain gets all wired up and misconstrues arousal and gender euphoria. So don't be alarmed. That doesn't make you any less trans. The coach offers her therapy, but I don't think she's qualified, and based on what happens later in the movie, it sounds like she would be a really improper therapist. Chrissy goes back into boy mode when she gets home because her parents are there and they wouldn't be supportive. Marie shows up early.
So are you Chris's girlfriend?
Yeah.
Also, as a side note, I'm not really a fan how in English the word girlfriend can both mean a platonic female friend and a female romantic partner. It's needlessly confusing, and Spanish does a better job at this. Then Chrissy comes out of a robe and says she's moisturizing. Also, her sister covers for her and even calls her little sister, which would honestly be affirming as hell. At the Halloween party, Chrissy male presents and is anxious and uncomfortable. She also tells Kurt to embrace his sensitive side, which causes Kurt to deliver flowers to Chrissy. But her father answers the door and gay panic ensues.
Love, Kurt. Oh, you see. Christian.
And the confrontation doesn't go any better.
Are you gay?
What?
It's okay if you are. I mean, I'd understand.
This isn't reassuring. No wonder she stays in the closet. And she convinces her father that she's just trying to help Kurt, who she says is gay, and that her father buys it because he's an idiot. Although you could probably guess that because all bigots are dumb. Chrissy makes the cheer team, which shows really that she's enjoying it and it feels like herself. She's breaking out of her shell, and transitioning does that. When you're more comfortable with yourself, you're more likely to be social. She even talks about how excited she is to wear the uniform. A very trans thing to say. But the coach says she should basically out herself to her parents, which is a terrible idea. Don't ever do this. It can be dangerous, especially in cases like this where the parents aren't supportive. There's a reason her sister knows and not her father. Unfortunately, many new laws in some states mandate this. Outing kids to their family. Protect queer kids. These laws don't protect kids, they put them in danger. Chrissy then goes to cheer camp and basically comes up with an excuse for her father. But Kurt can't join them because the dorm is strictly for women only. Then the most ridiculous thing happens. Marie's mom calls and basically reveals all to Chrissy's father, assuming she's just a daughter. But the tip-off is that...
Oh, you have a lovely daughter, Mrs. Stark.
So do you. Did she tell you I'm organizing a blood drive?
I'm sorry. What did you say?
This is weird because most people in this situation would probably think either she misspoke, you misheard it, or she's talking about your other child.
Like, I didn't think it was this serious.
He's dressing as a woman. How much more serious can it be?
He could be married.
To a man or a woman?
Look, that joke may have landed in 1993, but today the father just seems nuts. Meanwhile, at cheerleading camp, Chrissy kisses Marie, which to me comes across more like misreading signals, because they were dancing together pretty intimately. Again, trans lesbians, bisexuals, and pansexuals exist. And then the parents barge in and are like, you gotta leave. The mother's like, continue dressing as a girl until you can transfer schools. But the father's like, F that. This is just sad and dehumanizing for Chrissy. Then cross-dressing Kurt comes in looking for Chrissy. It didn't go well. And Marie reveals Chrissy's a lesbian. I personally think she's bi because for me, that sort of resembles how my attraction to men was prior to transitioning. A lot of teasing, and now I have a long-term boyfriend. And Kurt announces that he's in love with Chrissy. And Kurt's also like, I should cross-dress more often. Go off, queen. Chrissy gets a letter from performing arts school, but since she applied as a boy, they think she has to present as a boy for the showcase because cross-dressing and music never go together. Chrissy then meets up with the coach for herself and she gets horrible advice. Out yourself at the assembly. So many bad ideas. The next day, Chrissy sneaks out of the house in the cheerleading uniform. And when the father calls to school, they use she, her pronouns for her on the phone, and it causes the father to enter a tailspin. That was really progressive of the admin to change the records in 1993. And of course, the father blames the mother because you didn't let him play with guns. But remember, guns are dangerous and you can't determine queerness based on upbringing. Just accept your kids, okay? Then at the assembly, Chrissy outs herself in an over-the-top way, and Kurt runs out to presumably vomit. A horrible transphobic and homophobic trope. Chrissy loses her new friends, however Kurt, when given the chance, refused to hit her, which is actually a pretty good character arc. Also, the old woman from earlier buys Chrissy earrings. A true ally. However, in the end, she performs as a boy, and it's mediocre.
Mediocre?
I think after the events of this movie, she continues dressing as female, just more secretly. Maybe she gets a record contract, but there's no way in hell she's getting after that performance. However, I think she will definitely transition as soon as she can after leaving her parents' house. Now let's discuss the 2 titles for this movie. Just One of the Girls works as a title, however, I think they changed it to avoid confusion with Just One of the Guys, which has an extremely similar plot. A teen girl dressing as a boy to escape their problems. Hopefully I'll cover that at a later date. The other title, Anything for Love, is not a good name because it implies it's about a boy who transitions to get closer to girls. Which, in addition to being a transphobic trope, makes no goddamn sense. It's like if McDonald's tried selling burgers in a Whole Foods. However, I think we can think of this title differently. There are many different kinds of love. There is romantic love, platonic love, and also self-love. And as I tell everyone, transitioning is an act of self-love. To be truly yourself. Not to mention transitioning to get closer to girls is a legitimate reason. It's one of the reasons I transitioned, to get platonically closer to other girls. Mixed gender friendships and relationships are fundamentally different to same gender friendships and relationships. A trans woman dating another woman is extremely different in terms of dynamics of a cis man dating a cis woman. Like for me, before transitioning, I went on a date with a gay man. It didn't work. We weren't compatible. I wonder why. But do you know what is compatible? You and my Patreon. Seriously, you made it to the end of the video. Treat yourself to my Patreon. On there, I've lost videos I can't show on YouTube, like my reactions to American Dad, Community, in the amazing world of Gumball. But if you can't afford it, no pressure. Please just do me some smaller favors, like liking this video, subscribing, leaving a comment, and hyping, whatever the hell that is. But I do want to conclude this video by saying, it's a beautiful day because you're here. See you next time.